Welcome everyone back to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, sure. Thank you for having me, first of all.
Well,
So
for
I'm
sure.
based in the UK, London. I am a leadership coach slash executive coach. I also specialize a lot in leadership coaching and training of very senior project managers. Because as we may talk about, a lot of managers need leadership skills, and that's really where I come in. And I've been doing this for between I would say 10 and 15 years. So it's running leadership programs, coaching. And before that time, I was one of those in the thick of it myself, running big complex projects and being very stressed out and making all the classic mistakes.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's enough context.
Well, it's an awesome context. And one of the reasons I was really interested in speaking with you was something that one of the big motivations for this podcast is I'm a father trying to figure things out and trying to pass on information to my daughter. And she's 8. And there's quite a few times I don't have the information that I need. And there are things that I'd love to bestow to her. And I made a list of really interesting traits and different professions that look at those traits. And that's how I kind of came up with my second season of my podcast and how I'm looking at things. And I reached out to you because of some of the stuff that you posted about project management. But when we started messaging, something popped up. I saw your book and you were talking about leadership, and that was really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. The first thing was this: my daughter is in a class, and I'm overseas. I'm outside of the U.S., UK. I'm actually in Vietnam, and they have this interesting thing they do here that I'm going to say right off the bat, I really don't like. It's something that I really don't like about the school systems. And again, without being judgmental, this thing rubs me the wrong way because of how I feel about leadership. The schools will have the class. My daughter has 28 kids in her class. There's the teacher, TA. And after that, they appoint a student leader. We had those in my class as well when I was a kid, and I remember that. And often there was merit, they were voted, and they were constantly changing. So all of the different children could learn how to lead, which is a really great skill to have. My daughter's school appoints the school leader. My daughter, she was driving home the other day and she's like, oh yeah, that boy's the class leader. And it's like, okay, cool. And she's like, yeah, you know what? We found out he'll be the class leader all the way through next year and until we're in fifth grade. I was like, hey, hang on, what?
Wow.
Say what? Oh yeah, he was the leader since first grade. Then he was the leader in second grade. He's a leader in third grade now, and he'll be the leader next year in fourth grade. But when we go to fifth grade, we'll get a new leader. And I was just my skin was crawling, and I was just like, whoa, hold on. How do the other children learn to lead? And they were like, well, and I spoke to my wife about it, and she says, well, how they view it is they view children that they feel have leadership qualities, and that child is picked. And why would you want to develop other people to lead when you have someone who's a born leader? But I came up through team sports, and we had these natural leaders on our team who couldn't lead, that they got there from their charisma or from their personality. But when it came time to actually do things that needed to be done to guide us from one point to another, it was sorely missing. And it just so it popped into my head. And I was like, well, how do people learn to lead? Because we have this traditional, I mean, not we, but pop culture has this, the leader. They're outgoing, they look a certain way, they might be haircut a certain way. But in reality, some of the best leaders that I've had on teams I've been on did not fit that. They were very different types. I remember in university, the true leader of my school volleyball team was this guy named Dorian. Dorian was moody. He was back and forth. He was all types of qualities that you definitely wouldn't say that's leadership material. But he led from the front. When things got challenging, he rolled up his sleeves and he got in there. And he inspired everyone with his work ethic, with the way he did things. And he was willing to do whatever was needed in that situation. and it was inspiring to me to watch that. Now, what inspired you to start studying and talking about leaders, and how can people start looking at the principles of leadership? What is that all about? Talk to me.
Mm, mm. Well, I think, oftentimes when we get interested in something, it obviously comes from our own story. And I was one of those stressed out managers because I don't think I was a leader in that sense. I was a stressed out manager trying to make everything happen. And I went on a leadership program. I was very fortunate. I was picked to attend amongst many of my colleagues. And we were doing the classic self-assessments, we were doing 360 reviews, we were doing personality profiling, and we received coaching. And we got an assignment to coach each other. And I
Yeah.
had such a big aha moment during that 1 hour coaching session because I somehow realized that I had choice. I
Mm.
realized that my limitations were in my own mind. And it's interesting how all of that somehow it clicked for me within a split second. I thought, oh my God, if I want to, let's say, go home at 5 p.m., I can go home at 5 p.m. It's my own limitations that hold me back, and that it's my own working patterns that lead me to exhaustion. And the same goes from leading my team and how I was influencing or not influencing my team. I just realized from that whole program I attended that managers, myself included, and project managers, we need leadership. It's like a
Mm.
whole new landscape opened up to me. Not a landscape of just getting things done or being task oriented, but a landscape of uh, being conscious of what are we trying to achieve? Okay, I knew that, but the bigger picture. Why are we here? How are we working together? How how can I empower each of the team members to follow or to lead themselves? Perhaps it's not just about getting things done and pushing
Yeah.
things through. It's about inspiring. It's about inspiring people to also follow. So it's a whole different landscape, as I said, and I thought that was fascinating. And it just all of that happened, will you believe it, within this leadership program, which was like, I don't know, five days.
That's
I
awesome.
didn't have all the answers, but I had the inspiration to go down that route.
What traits make a leader? What things, or not, maybe not traits, maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. What are things that people who want to be leaders should look at, should learn?
Mm. Well, I think it's important to say that I think you mentioned it before. We have this archetypical view of the perfect leader, and I don't think that perfect leader exists. Actually, I've
Right.
coached so many managers and leaders, and you see really good traits in one person and another really good set of traits in another person. And it's very rare to have nobody's perfect, and nobody's perfect at leading either. Some people are overly assertive and they need to tone down a little bit. Other people, they lack assertiveness and they need to dial it up a bit. So I think because I work individually with people, so it's all about meeting them where they are at. But I would say some of the common traits is the emotional intelligence.
I love that.
Because this is not just about task orientation and pushing things through, it's about leading through others. We don't lead through a task, we lead through others. That's leadership. And so my
Yeah.
relationship with other people has to be at the forefront. There's obviously
Mm.
also things about the vision. If I don't have a vision for where we are going, there is no leadership. Then we're just happy where we are. That's not leadership. So there has to be this combination of where are we going and perhaps leading from the front, combined with a leading from behind where I
Yeah.
empower others and lead through others. And we can unpack that, but I think that there's some of the essentials. And then you have all the character traits of being reliable, being trustworthy, and a lot of character traits that make a leader more trustworthy, more believable, more influential, and many other beautiful traits that some have and some are working on.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Because I've met people who were extremely book smart, and they were, well, this is something that, without diving into it, like, I was remember reading that there wasn't always a connection between test scores and success. that there were other things at play. And one of the things that I remember reading about was the importance of emotional intelligence. And as I've gotten further in my career, I used to want to believe that everything was based on merit, everything was based on your skill. But I know some very skilled people who, when they were out of work, took ages to find another job because they had not nourished the network that they were in, and they didn't have the emotional intelligence to build that. And sometimes it's interesting to see we forget that. And with my daughter, I'm trying to help work at cultivating emotional intelligence, but I don't always get it right and don't always know what to do. But how can people develop and improve their emotional intelligence and their relationships with people and also their decision making? How do people build that?
I think with kids and with adults is slightly different because with kids learn a lot through shadowing adults. So
Yeah.
if you are displaying a lot of emotional intelligence, if you are listening, if you are empathizing, if you're good at regulating your emotions, you will set a brilliant example for her because that's how kids learn. Adults, they already have a template. All right, they already have a set of programming, if you want to call it that, a set of behaviors. And so we need to be very conscious if you want to change. Everybody can change. It just takes some extra effort. If we're just an autopilot doing what we've always done, we're not going to learn, we're not going to change. So the first
Yeah.
step is saying, okay, I've recognized that I can get better at listening, empathizing, really trying to walk in other people's shoes.
Yeah.
Number two, I recognize that I could get better at regulating my emotions. Sometimes I get angry and I act it out,
Hmm.
which may be okay in some circumstances. Other circumstances, not okay. I recognize that I could be more effective if I was better able to express my sadness in a constructive way, or my anger, whatever that emotion is. Because let's face it, we all get triggered by emotions at times.
Yeah.
We all have situations that are difficult, and emotional intelligence is a big part of that. So I think number one, recognizing that okay, there is such a thing as emotional intelligence. I do want to improve in it. Then I can begin to look at how I do that, and there are specific ways of doing that.
And I love that point. Um, my friend had, his kids were playing in the yard and they were out and doing something that was not really safe kid thing. And kid came back inside and my friend saw a, like, I don't know, some piece of metal sticking out of his leg. And he's like, whoa, you've got a piece of metal in your leg. We need to go to the ER. And the kid looked down and was like, oh, I do. It was, I guess, endorphins or like adrenaline. Child didn't feel it. And my friend, luckily, is a ER nurse. So he took care of his son really quick, got him okay. But when he got there, he was sitting there and talking to him. And he's like, you didn't feel anything? No, I slipped. And I was playing with something, but I didn't see where it was at. And I kept playing. We can often have problems that we can't see. And,
Mhm.
or at least we tune out, even if they're a blaring thing, and it might cause problems later on. I know that for myself, um, I get angry easy, especially in traffic. And it's not something I used to have, but as my stress levels built up, and it's always something that my daughter the other day looked at me and she said, Daddy, I think we should work on not getting angry. And I said, I think so too.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, yeah,
Wow. How old is
I
she?
think 8. She's
Wow.
very wise for her age. And I was like, all right, that's a good thing to do. And then I sat there and I said, but how do we do it? And I started looking online and finding resources and started informing myself. And luckily, I have a great resource. My mom's a therapist. And I was like, hey, your granddaughter's wisdom is deep right now. But it was, again, it was taking that something that I didn't see, something that was there. It was obvious to
Mm.
others, but it wasn't clear to me. And it kind of came back to a bit of like an authenticity. You have to be real with yourself, with others, and your situation. But um, why is it important to be authentic? How does that play into leadership?
Well, I just want to pick up on what you said,
I would
because
love it.
in light of showing our emotions and not showing our emotions, I think it's important to say what is authenticity, because you asked this question just after saying that you want to work on your emotions. Some people misuse the word authenticity to say, well, I'm angry, so I'm showing my anger, I'm being authentic.
Yes. So talk to me. What do you mean there then?
Right. And so some people misuse that. And I don't think that's authenticity. I think authenticity, the way I would break it down, is when I think and feel, when there is alignment between what I think and feel and what I say and do, I'm authentic.
Hmm.
Okay, let's say I feel angry. So if I should be authentic, should I not just shout? No, you can still express your emotion without shouting. And that's what emotional intelligence and self-regulation is all about. We can be authentic in our emotions without acting out the emotion. I just wanted
No, I love that.
um,
I
to
think
put
that's
that on the
awesome.
table first.
Because it's like that is something that I was something a misconception I had. I thought authentic. I was like people like I'm angry and they shout it from a mountaintop, but
Right.
it doesn't help all the time. It doesn't always help you
No.
be a good leader or to if I'm screaming I'm angry and my wife is right here next to me, that's not going to go well. Yeah, she's not going to be so happy with that. But if I
Right.
say I'm angry and this is why, and
Exactly.
it goes down a little bit better.
Because we also don't want to go down the opposite route, which is suppressing it. No, 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 I'm fine. I'm fine. Just go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm fine. Well, you're not fine. So it is that it's really a dance, and it is not easy to learn, but we can learn it, to express our emotion without being the emotion. Because when we
Yeah.
are the emotion, when you are the anger and you are the sadness and you are the fear, we like possessed by this emotion. We're not thinking clearly. We're just
No.
acting out.
Yes.
So you asked about authenticity. Why
Yeah.
is it important? Mm.
Well, how can we then? There was and I don't know the full story. I worked on movie sets. I used to work in film, and there was a story that came out a couple weeks ago about Jason Momoa, and this one YouTuber was on set, and she's like, he got angry and yelled at the crew,
Mm.
and I've been there where when you're working in movies, and I'm not justifying anyone's anger. I'm not justifying in the way they react. I remember there was a story I heard from one of the camera crew on this big movie I worked on back in the day of film. And I believe that it was on this. I don't know I'm not going to say which production it was, but one of the camera ops was his job was to simply store the film, put it in the correct place. And then after it's stored, they would take it and develop it. And this was a director who liked to have big explosions and things. And that person did not store it correctly. And they lost a day of shooting of a very high budget movie. Probably was a couple $1 million worth of money lost. And tempers definitely rose. Now, in this story where they were talking about Jason Momoa, they said he got angry and he yelled at people. And this is one of the things that I always have questioned about authenticity, because maybe there is a justifiable reason for being upset. But like you said, the emotional intelligence part, because you're not going to rally the troops, you're not going to get people to get to move toward the goal you want if they're afraid that you're going to be popping and blowing up all the time.
Mm. Yeah, and we're not trying to not justify emotions. Emotions are always justified. You can't say to somebody, you shouldn't be sad right now. There's
Right?
nothing to be afraid of. Well, my body is telling me that I'm frightened. I
Yeah.
know, there's 100 people waiting for me out there to speak. I'm frightened. You're telling me not to be afraid. We can't argue with people's emotions,
Yeah.
but we can help them regulate. We can help them down regulate just by naming and saying, I feel afraid right now. Well, I'm so pissed right now that you didn't store this right. Do you know how much this is costing us?
Yeah.
Do you really know? Try to put yourself in my shoes. I'm gutted. It's uncomfortable. There's still a tough conversation, but
Yeah.
I'm not losing my temper.
Yeah. And I mean, and it doesn't mean that there might not be consequences. It doesn't mean that that person might need to
Mm,
find another job. Doesn't mean that you're not taking action
yeah.
or teaching them how to correct that. It just means that you are able to communicate without popping. As
And
I've
sorry,
go ahead. No, no, please. I'd
one of
love
the
to hear.
biggest leadership moments and leadership situations is giving feedback. And I think that
Yes.
goes for raising kids as well. Friends, I don't know. Sometimes we can choose to give feedback or not. It's different, I think, friends. But parent child or in a work situation where there are some clear roles and some clear expectations and some clear agreements, we
Yeah.
do need to give feedback. And so sometimes it is not a comfortable conversation, but we need to say the truth. We can
Yeah.
be kind in saying the truth because we want the other person to hear what we're saying. If
Right.
I if I'm being overly harsh or critical or judgmental, even if I want to be, it's the other person's going to shut down. They're not going to hear it.
Yeah.
So we need to have a constructive conversation where I can discuss. Let's say I'm disappointed about something that didn't get done, even if you promised you were going to do it. We have to talk about that. We can't just gloss over it. We can't ignore it. We have to have a real conversation where we can each express what's happening and not be so possessed by our emotions that we can't listen to each other.
Right. I think that's so important. That the ability to communicate in a way that other people can hear, and then to be on the opposite side of being willing to hear. Living in a country where people don't speak the same language as me has always been interesting because there's always this gap in understanding. But I also notice the same gap when I go back to the US now of people will be like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. But we don't necessarily actually engage in active listening. Many people, it's like in one ear, out the other. And it is such a skill as a team member as well as the leader to be able to hear people. So I love that.
Yeah, and that is not always easy when we are busy, we're running. The same with in a family situation. You don't
Yeah,
always have time because there is something, there's a train we need to catch, or there's a deadline to deliver to this. So we need to choose our moments, right? We need to be flexible. And sometimes, listen, we can't always be perfect. And we also have to be careful not to be too harsh and critical of ourselves. As I said before, I don't think the perfect leader exists. And I'm quite sure the perfect parent doesn't exist either
right.
because it's human to be flawed, but we can work towards being a little bit better today than yesterday. But let's not beat ourselves up either.
I love that. I love, yeah. If you can be a little bit better today than yesterday, you're on the right track. And like you said, there are some days. What was it? That one foot, a step forward, two steps back, and then you try to take a couple more steps forward.
Mm.
There are some different leadership styles that you had mentioned. What are some of the different leadership styles that people have?
You actually started off this conversation by mentioning one of them, which is
What is it?
leading from the front.
Okay. Yes.
So it's that visionary, and I think we often think of that as leadership. I
Yes.
show the way, I'm visionary. It's this way we're going, and that can be very helpful when you're trying to rally the troops and show people where we're going and sell your idea and inject some energy into a team or whatever your team is, whether it's work related or another type of project. It's not the only leadership style. We also already mentioned another one, leading from behind when I'm trying to empower other people or
Yeah.
empower a child, a young child, or a almost adult child, a teenager, to make their own decisions. You can do it. You can do it. So I'm behind you. I'm going to catch you, but I'm going to make you take the decision. I'll guide you perhaps, but you're the one leading now. So that's
Yeah.
also leadership style. We might call that the coaching leadership style.
Right.
Then we have a leadership style that I think is a little less known. In my world, it's actually Daniel Goleman who wrote the emotional intelligence book many years ago. He came up with these 6 leadership styles that I work with, and he called this one the affiliative style.
Okay. What's that?
Affiliative comes from the word affiliation, so it's a heart center style
Ah.
where what's important to me as a leader is that you feel good. And you
Mm,
might think, well, that's a bit of a funny leadership style. How can we get things done if it's just about feeling good? But we need to think about all of these leadership styles as we can mix and match them even inside of one conversation. So the affiliative leadership style is very, very important if somebody is frightened, like, oh my God, I'm going to get a new boss, or
right.
we're going to sell the company, or
Mm,
whatever else I'm going to do that makes me really worried about change. Then it's important that I can just relate to how you're feeling, because otherwise I can't get through to you. So I need to empathize, I need to listen to you. And then once you're okay, I can switch into another leadership style. Then we have the democratic style, where we make decisions together. That's very powerful when it doesn't actually matter what color we paint the walls. We just need to agree together as a team.
yeah.
So democratic is good to get buy-in. We all together. It doesn't matter if we go left or right. It matters that we all agree. Um, and then we have the good old-fashioned command and control. I don't care,
Yeah.
just do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to discuss it, honestly. And we poo-poo that style. It's still very, very used, and
Yeah.
we poo-poo it because nobody likes to be given orders like that, and people mostly like to make their own decisions. But there are times when it is important. In times of crisis, we don't have time to
Yeah.
discuss.
Right.
But people shouldn't overuse it. And then the last of the styles I'll mention here is the pace setter. So I roll up my sleeves, I get things done, and you just have to copy me because I'm the expert and I know all about it. And this can be a very powerful style if you're working with a team or a group of kids maybe who don't know. They don't know. So they need somebody who they can copy. But after a while, we need to switch into a coaching style and slowly slip into the background, because if we keep having running in front and being the pace setter, we're not empowering others at all.
It's so true. It's interesting that it comes back to that old teach a person to fish or catch a fish.
Mhm.
How does that saying go? You feed someone.
Yeah.
Do you remember how's that go?
Yeah. So the way I say it is that you teach a person how to fish, how to catch a fish. Sorry, how to
Yeah.
catch a fish. Because if you catch the fish for them, they're not going to learn it. They're going to rely on
Yeah.
you to do it, and it's much easier if you do it for them.
Right. It is much easier, but then you're going to have to do it for them every single time.
Right.
And it's again and again and again. And as a parent, that's one that you see all the time, Daddy, can you get me some water? Well, let's make sure that you know how to go to the fridge and open up the fridge and get the glass, the milk out and pour it, or water. It's really interesting that you see that more, but it takes one of the challenges with that for myself and my own leadership journey is that takes more time, and there's more. It's almost easier if I'm doing all right, let's do it this way, leading from the front, but that burns you out. I get really tired always being at the front, always trying to lead the way. And so I love the transitioning into more of the coaching style makes so much sense to me.
And
Do you
again,
find, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that it takes that conscious effort, because people get stuck in certain leadership styles. We get stuck in, yes, I know it's tiring, but it's easy and it's quick and we don't have time. Well, can we help people reframe that? Because it's exhausting for me and it's exhausting for my team. So sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
Not at all. You answered the question I was going to ask. It was along those lines. I was going to ask, if you see people in one style more predominantly, and how can they shift to another?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a little self-assessment where I can, through some questions, people can see what style they're most often. So most often you see um, one or two or maybe three styles that are at the top, and then there are some that they never use. But self-assessments are a little bit flawed, perhaps sometimes,
Right.
because there are things we don't see, as you mentioned before. So a
Hmm.
360 is a more accurate way of gaining a perspective. So you ask other people for their opinions. So again, it comes with awareness. When I'm aware that I tend to just use two of the leadership styles, I can set an intention to start using some of the other styles when appropriate. And I always say to people, and this goes, I think, for all the topics we mentioned, how do I begin to self-regulate? How do I begin to change my leadership style? No matter what we want to change, I think it has to be situational.
I love that.
Choose a situation or a specific person with whom you interface just once a week or twice a week, and set the intention so you can prepare for that. Because if we
Mm,
just say, oh, I'm going to use the coaching style more, or oh, I'm going to get better at regulating my anger, how, when, where? It's not enough. It's too broad. So we need to be very specific, find a situation that typically happens for us, whether it's regulating the anger or whether it's beginning to ask more questions in a coaching leadership situation. And then we can begin to practice.
I love that. Well, and one of the things that one of the funny things I've been I'm a sucker for zombie movies, and I've been rewatching part of The Walking Dead. And one of the funny things with that show is that it's kind of like people in a microcosm. You see this show and you see these people in this situation. And especially with the character that I always loved was Rick. He was the leader. He was thrust into this situation of keeping all these people together, safe, trying to get them to the right place and trying to navigate it, and not necessarily having any resources or anyone telling him how. And there were so many times where I would see the episode that I was just watching, he kind of had fear and doubt, and a lot of these emotions kind of boil up as he was trying to handle this. And you see it around all the time. My friend called me today, one of my best friends, and she was dealing with some stuff with her family and her father aging. And she just messaged me and she says, I am handling all of this anxiety, doubt, and fear, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to process this. How do you recommend for people to handle doubt and fear and anxiety when facing changes in their lives?
Hmm. It's a big question. It's an important question, and thankfully we are much better now at talking about mental health, emotional well-being, and there is much more focus now also on mindfulness. And I've drawn
Yeah,
a lot on mindfulness. So my most recent book, how to do the inner work, is actually very much about emotional well-being,
awesome.
and I draw on mindfulness a lot in that book. And one of the first principles is to name the emotion. We don't want to suppress the emotion, and we don't want it to take over either. We want to accept it and dance with it. It's very, very difficult to dance with doubt and fear. We don't want them. We try to
Yeah,
distract ourselves. So we drink, or we go shopping, or we watch a film, or we just can't deal with it. But how do we begin to deal with it? You can't push it away. You can't run away from the
yeah,
emotion. So naming it and saying, wow, I feel doubt again today, or I feel uncertainty, or here is this old feeling of sadness. I recognized you, whatever it is. That naming it is the first step, because I'm not pushing it away.
yeah,
I'm seeing it. And the thing is, the emotion will often pass through us.
yeah,
So naming it is not the only thing, but I think that's step number one, naming it. And then there are other techniques of actually, I like a technique of journeying a little bit with the emotion and perhaps having a little bit of a dialogue. I hear you. I know, what are you here to tell me? Because an emotion like um, doubt probably has
yeah.
some valid concerns for me. Maybe it's trying to protect me from something. So if
Right.
I can listen to the message, maybe I need to take some action. Maybe that doubt can move on. If your friend is worrying about, was it her parent,
Her father's
her father?
aging.
You know, she's worried. What is that worry telling me? Where, go and take action. Okay, I've done what I can to protect him. I've set him up. I've done this. Maybe there's nothing more I can do now. So I think sometimes listening to those emotions and those thoughts is okay as long as I don't get um, uh, taken over by them and consumed by them. It is a fine balance, but we
It
have
really
to
is.
basically be okay to have that dialogue.
And I think that a lot of people are taught are not taught how to be okay with that dialogue, are not taught to have the mindfulness. And I think that I have another podcast where I talk to people about money, my Growing Money podcast. And you want to talk about ostrich with the head in their sand. Talk about money to people. And so many people will be like, whoop, out of
Yeah.
sight, out of mind. It is very easy to kind of tuck that away. And there's a state of vulnerability that a person has to find, and a state of honesty with themselves about some of these emotions, about feeling certain ways, and like you said, sometimes it is really helpful. I like to look in the mirror, and if I'm feeling scared, I'll look at myself and say, Sean, why are you scared? And sometimes I will say something that I'm not expecting. I will say something will come out that I was just like, yeah, that is it. That is it.
Mm.
And giving myself permission to say that, and then to sit there and think about that, and then
Mm.
kind of bringing my rational mind back in. Yes, that might be the case, but you might be, what is it, the catastrophic thinking, going to a place that is, you're expecting, maybe it's this, but you're expecting it to be over here, oh, my boss looked at me in a different way today. Oh my goodness, I'm getting fired. Well, no, hold on. Probably not that. Maybe they're just having a bad day. And maybe they did give you a look, but it maybe has nothing to do with what you think it is. Maybe it's something else. But if you can start talking to yourself and saying, all right, well, I'm feeling this way. Maybe I should just talk to them. Maybe I should say something. Maybe I should ask, hey, how are you doing today? Is everything okay? Starting the
Well, now I
conversation.
know why your daughter is so wise, because what you're describing there is definitely journeying with the emotions, and I'm sure that you're showcasing that to your daughter too. So,
I'm trying.
imagine if all parents were like that. That's just a beautiful example what you just shared there.
Yeah. Well, I don't have it figured out. And I think that I realized I don't have it figured out. And I'm trying to find some honesty with myself and work through it. Today we had a situation where I'm a black belt in judo, and I studied Muay Thai for a long time, and I'm teaching my daughter martial arts. And I was having a conversation with my wife, and my daughter really wanted my attention. And my wife was about ready to head to work, and I really wanted to get through what we were saying. And then suddenly she didn't get my attention, so she walked up and kicked me in the bum. And not hard, but it was enough, and it was disrespectful. It wasn't respecting me in that situation. I turned around and I was extremely angry with her. And I was like, you know what, as a martial artist, that is the one thing that you never do. Punching and kicking is a dangerous thing. We only use that for protecting ourselves. We don't do that to someone that we care about. But I was louder and more angry. But then we walked outside, got in the elevator, and I said, and I calmed down, because I recognized that in that anger, I said, you're not going to get yelled at anymore. You apologized. But I needed to talk to you about why in that situation I wanted to talk to your mother. I wanted to have those 2 seconds with her because she's been traveling. I haven't seen her as much. And I'm going to see you all evening. We're going to be together all evening. You'll have all my time tonight. And she got it. But it took me slowing down, centering. I was still angry. And there was no way that I was not going to be angry. But realizing that in that moment, the anger wasn't doing anything. It was scaring her. And I don't want her to be scared. I want her to speak with me in an honest,
Mm.
positive way. If she needs my attention, tell me that. But also understand that sometimes you have to wait. And so it
Yeah.
was really, really hard tonight.
No, it's a wonderful example because it showcases so well that your anger may be justified, but it's not about whether it's justified or not, because our emotions are most justified. Well, I think they're always justified, but it's your response to that anger that matters, and also recognizing that we have these emotions. It's not wrong
Yeah.
to have emotions. It's not wrong to have fear or doubt or sadness. I remember my therapist some years back, during COVID, and I said, like, it's depressing, or I'm depressed, or something like that. Not clinically, because I have never been clinically depressed, thankfully. But I used that word or something like that. And she said,
Yeah.
what's wrong with that?
Right?
Because the situation is depressing, because everything was in lockdown. And so she said, maybe that's a natural response.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we want things to, we think that it's all natural to be happy all the time.
Yeah.
I think we know is not natural, but a part of us wants to think that, oh my God, if I have a perfect life, then I'm going to be happy all the time. Emotions are natural. Different thoughts are natural. We have a negativity bias. We are wired to survive. So we're
Yeah.
wired to see threats. We're wired to be suspicious if there's too much change. That's just part of our design. So we are going to have these fluctuations, and when we expect that, I think it's going to be easier for us. Oh yeah, um, I feel so and so today. Yeah, it's going to pass.
Yeah.
I acknowledge it. I don't have to act on it. Maybe I do, but most of the time we don't have to act on it.
Two things that I want to chime in, and I loved. I once saw this Inside the Actors Studio with Tom Hanks, and he was giving advice to these other actors, and they're like, "What's the thing that you would tell people?" And he's like, "I got to work with Tom, and he's beyond wise. He's a really, really interesting, wise person." But when he was talking to these actors, he said, "This too shall pass. Whenever I get worked up, this too shall pass. When I get angry, this too shall pass. Whatever it is that you're experiencing, give yourself time for that to kind of flow through." And, and I also love what you're talking about with we're wired for negativity. I've read an absolutely amazing book about that once, The Practical Neuroscience of Buddhism. And it was looks at the how we're wired. And it's done by two guys who are neuroscientists and not Buddhists, but they were looking at the brain and mindfulness from a scientific perspective and looking at how the brain is wired. And the whole book goes into this because positive, you find a mate, you find food, yay, you have to do it again tomorrow. You survive not getting eaten by a T-Rex. Well, that for our little tiny animal ancestors was a big deal, And so watching out for those monsters in the closet, it has always been, it's really wired in there.
Yes, and if I may add something there, because I think we need food to survive. Another basic human need is connection with others and feeling accepted. And
Yes.
if we're not aware of that, we don't understand why we always behave the way we do. But as a
Yeah.
young child, and your daughter, if she feels just that moment that you're not listening to her, and I'm not
Yeah.
trying to justify her kicking you,
No.
but if a child feels excluded somehow, or if adults feel excluded, but that's where it comes from.
Yes.
If we were excluded from the tribe back then, we cannot survive on our own. And so
Yeah.
feeling accepted, all these things we do to please the boss or whoever we're pleasing, it's again is wired into us. So we need to, the more conscious we are, the more we can say, yeah, maybe I'm exhausting myself here. Maybe I don't need to be so worried in this situation, but it is something we have definitely a tendency to do.
100%. And you're speaking to the choir today because that was something I was experiencing today. And um, brings me to my next question. You talk about different types of communication. What are some of the different communications that can help us build these stronger connections and navigate some of the challenges that we have with communicating with people in our lives?
So now leadership programs, we work with this, we call it the 4 levels of communication, but it's essentially like an iceberg model where
Yeah.
we all know the tip of the iceberg is above the water. And that's actually where we spend most of our time communicating. In a work context, it's about what needs to get done, when it's going to get done, why you didn't get it done, the issues about getting it done, uh, all this stuff about what we can see of the tangible pieces.
Yeah.
What we're not so good at, and what we need to do if we want to have much deeper communication, is to go into below the ice, below the waterline, which is about what's happening between you and I,
Yeah.
not just what we are here to deliver. What are our behaviors? What are our behaviors towards each other? What do we expect from each other? Why did I get so angry at you yesterday? What happened there? we're not good at talking about that. Like the conversation you had with your daughter in the elevator, where you kind of owned up to it and you said, listen, we need to talk about this. Move that to a, first of all, many parents probably wouldn't even do that, or not even, but wouldn't do that. Um, and in a work context, we often don't get to that level. We brush it aside. We are quickly on to the next thing. And
Right.
also expressing our emotions. In a work context, it is very, very important that we can talk about that when something has gone wrong, or if we're about to embark on a new big project. Let's talk about what we expect from each other, because
I love that.
otherwise we could actually be misunderstanding each other. So it's going
Right.
deeper in the levels of communication.
I love that. Because sometimes we will say something. There was this great Key and Peele sketch where, do you know Key and Peele, the comedians from America, and they did a bunch of short, sketch comedy on Comedy Central, and there was this one where they were texting each other back and forth, and the one friend thought the other friend was trying to start a fight, but he was actually just saying, because it was all through text messages. And the guy's like, "You want to be at the club? Yeah, show up. I'll show up." And then they get there, and this guy's ready for a fight at the club, and the other friend's like, "What's up? I'm so glad to see you." And the guy's like, "Wow, we really missed the
Mm.
communication there." And so often we might have words going back and forth, but the real communication, what needs to be addressed, isn't, whether that be in a marriage or at a work relationship or even with you, a
Yeah.
parent and a child. My daughter kicked me because she wanted my attention. It had nothing to
Yeah.
do with the words. It was, "Daddy, I want to feel connected. I want to feel safe." You're spot on. And so, yeah.
And I want to ask you and your family if you have sat down and done your shared values, because in a team
No.
context, we do, and in a project context, we do what we call a project charter. So we write down what we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver it, who's going to do what, blah, blah, off we are. But we never do a team charter. Well, it's becoming a bit more common now, but a team charter is, who are we as a team? What are our strengths and weaknesses? What do we believe in? What's our team motto? Um, how do we want to behave towards each other? What are we going to do if somebody doesn't deliver their work? Let's talk about it up front. How are
Yeah.
we going to celebrate our successes? And so you can transfer that to a private, family context too, a couple, a family. What's important to us? Do we have a motto as a family? I mean, I've never seen a family do this, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment. How are we going to treat each other? What are we
Yeah.
going to do if somebody is dishonest in the family? I don't know. I may be taking this a bit too far, but
No,
talking
no, I
about
think
our
it's a great
expectations.
idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea because one of the things that I noticed in my family and families in general, there's this assumption. There are tons of assumptions that we are going to behave a certain way, are going to have a certain. But one of the things that I've learned from being married to someone from a completely different culture, we have different assumptions. And those assumptions lead me into trouble because I assume that things will be done a certain way, and my wife assumes a different way because they're cultural assumptions as well. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I think that that's a great idea, and I will have to try to set that intention for my family.
And I challenge all the people I coach. And whenever I do leadership, are they getting deeper? Are they talking about what needs to be talked about? Are they speaking about what's really important? All these assumptions. One thing is
Yeah,
our assumptions about delivery, but another one is the assumptions about our behaviors.
right.
Yeah,
I love that.
and that can really transform a team or a relationship or a family, because now we're getting somewhere. This is the real stuff. Because conflict, okay, we think conflict is about whether I want you to deliver something that's red and you want yellow. You think conflict in your family is whether one wants to go to the Philippines and the other wants to go to Thailand. But below the surface, what are we really arguing about? What's going on? What are my
Yeah,
needs? What are your needs? What are we arguing about? Maybe it's something different that's really going on.
yeah.
Maybe I'm angry because you always get your way. Well, let's talk about that instead of talking about where we're going and going to go on holiday. So
I
it's
love that.
always going deeper. What is really happening? I think that I love this because now we're changing lives.
Yeah,
We're changing the
totally.
quality of how people show up. We're changing the quality of relationships.
I love that. Wow.
Mm.
As you look at stuff, what strategies do you have to maintain your own well-being and energy when you juggle all of these things, all these projects, books, coaching? How do you take care of yourself and your energy? And how do you recommend other people do?
Yeah. So I've become very fond of mindfulness, and I've been doing a lot of mindfulness during the pandemic, after the pandemic, and it's informed that my recent book, How to Do the Inner Work. So going for a walk, being mindful with the trees. I absolutely love trees, and I see so many similarities with trees,
Mm,
communities, leadership. If I just may, a tree. What does a tree do if you start cutting down? If you start cutting a branch of a tree, I assume it's hurting the tree in some way, shape, or form.
yeah.
The tree can only accept that emotion. Sorry, no, I'm taking this a bit too
No?
far. But the tree can only stay there. They can't fight back.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very kind of if we, yeah, I think that's so interesting. It's a bit stoic perhaps, or
No.
but the tree is having to stay there and just be with what is. The other thing about trees is they communicate. They communicate with each other. They
Yep.
um, they give nutrients to each other, so they have a whole web below the soil with their roots, and the fungi is helping them to communicate. So um, individual trees in a city, like I live in London, they're much more stressed than in a forest or a park where the trees are co-located. So I love trees, and I get
Yeah.
a buzz from being present with the trees. And there's a really beautiful practice, which is, can you really look at the tree? Can you really see the tree?
Yeah.
And people are like, okay, I can be present with the tree. Right. Can you allow the tree to see you?
Ooh.
It's very interesting to just, because then you are there naked and letting the tree see whatever is going on for you. So there's a lot of nature can teach us a lot, and part of my own well-being routines is nature. And I live in a big city, but we have lots of parks here, and it's possible also to get outside the city. I get sunlight every morning. I get up, I go outside. Regulating our moods with sunlight, incredibly important. So that's just a little part of my routines. And other people, everybody has to have something they do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but I ask people, what gives you energy?
Yeah.
What drains you? Everybody knows.
Yeah.
So we just need a
Something.
little more of what gives us energy and a little less of what drains us. It doesn't have, you can do that with 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. I love that. I remember there was a tree that lived near my family. I lived up in Northern California, and there were all of these beautiful old oaks that lived up there. And there was one tree that I believe was about 150 years old. And I remember standing next to this big old gnarled tree. And what struck me was that it had been there before I was born for many, many years. And it would be there for many, many years after I'm gone. And it's just going to keep on going. And I felt just happy to be able to sit under its branches and knowing that there will be how many thousands of other people who sit under its branches as well. And it just
Mm,
gave me this this little bit of I love the Stoic philosophy of like a view from above. It just gave me a little bit of ability to step back and look at things from a different context, and that always helped me. So I love the nature walks as well. Though where I
mm.
live now, I don't get them as much as I need to, but yeah, definitely need to bring them back.
And it is important. I mean, we've been talking a little bit about change, about emotions. There's a lot going on. There's a lot. We live in a rapidly changing world, and I haven't said too much. And it's very important for people to keep grounded, whatever that means for that individual. Some people is playing an instrument. Some people is going running. Some people is praying. It doesn't matter. Some people is just laughing, with some good comedy. It doesn't matter. But we all need something that just makes us be in the moment and be carefree and just forget about all these big stresses that we can otherwise feel we're carrying on our shoulders.
That's a mic drop moment right there. How can people find your books? Where should they look for your coaching? Where can people look you up?
Yeah, so it's actually on my website, susannemadsen.com. So I think I didn't show this one yet. That's actually my well used
That's
Power of Project
awesome.
Leadership. Yeah, this is the second edition. It's actually an award winner. So I do many programs based on this book. And the new one, I haven't done a program yet because it's only just been released some months ago. So SusanneMadsen.com or .co.uk is the best place, Susanne with an S. And I'm also trying out a bit of some short videos on TikTok, but I'm mostly established on LinkedIn, I must say.
There you go. Well,
YouTube,
that's
I have lots
awesome.
of videos on YouTube.
Oh, really? So, and people can take a look there. If you could go back and give yourself one bit of advice, younger version of you, what advice would you give yourself?
How young?
Your choice. Let's say 20.
Okay, I know what that is because I had the opportunity to work with a therapist when I was 20, maybe 25. I think I was 25. And because it was my first job and it was during working hours, I couldn't, how could I take time off to go and see this therapist during the day? So I didn't do it. And I'm just thinking how my life would have changed, how my, how my, how it would have shown up differently in all those years
Yeah,
if I had actually worked with a therapist at that young age. And I basically think most people should work with a therapist. I didn't have
right,
any major traumas to work through, but still, I had lots of smaller bits and pieces and frustrations that just processing and being with my emotions for one, because I wasn't one that liked to actually acknowledge my emotions. So that's one thing I would say to people: if you get the opportunity to work with a coach or a mentor, somebody who's wise, or a therapist, even if you have to invest in it and make it happen, do it because it changes the quality of your entire life.